Lord Vrothak stood tall on the command deck of his battleship, gazing down at the blue planet below. Earth, a world filled with weak creatures who somehow managed to survive against stronger enemies. He had never understood humanity. They lacked natural weapons, their bodies were fragile, and yet they refused to bow to the mighty Zyrex dominion. It was frustrating. And now he was about to make a deal with them. Behind him, his daughter, Silara, stood silently, her golden eyes staring at the floor. She was the reason for this humiliation. Born into the ruling family of the Zyrex, she should have been a warrior, a conqueror like her father. But she was small by Zyrex standards. Her body lacked the powerful muscles of her kin, and her reflexes were slower. No matter how hard she trained, she could never match the might of her father or the great Zyrex warriors. To the Dominion, strength was everything, and Silara had none. So she was worthless. Vrothak turned as the doors to the chamber opened. A tall human man in a dark uniform stepped inside. His hair was short, his expression calm but sharp. Captain Elias Carter, one of the humans' top military diplomats. Vrothak's sharp claws tapped against the metal table. "You are late, human." Elias did not flinch. "Traffic was bad," he said dryly. "Let's talk." The Zyrex Lord narrowed his eyes. "I have no interest in your jokes. The Dominion is offering you a temporary ceasefire. In return, you will take her." He gestured at Silara, who remained still, her expression unreadable. Elias glanced at her, then back at Vrothak. "You're giving away your daughter." "She is of no use to me," Vrothak said coldly. "She is weak, a failure. I have no need for a daughter who cannot stand among warriors." For a moment, there was silence. Elias studied Silara carefully. She did not look like the other Zyrex warriors he had faced in battle. She was smaller, yes, but there was something else, a quiet fire in her eyes. "I see," Elias said. "So you're getting rid of her like garbage." Vrothak's claws clenched. "She is not garbage. She is simply worthless to the Dominion." Elias let out a slow breath. He hated the Zyrex way of thinking. Strength above all. The weak deserved nothing. It was disgusting. Still, this could be an opportunity. The Dominion had been a constant threat to humanity, but this deal meant peace, at least for a while. And Silara, maybe she wasn't as weak as her father believed. He looked at her again. "What do you want?" Silara's golden eyes flicked up, startled. No one had ever asked her that before. Vrothak scoffed. "She wants nothing. She will do as she is told." Elias ignored him, focusing on Silara. "Do you want to come with us?" She hesitated. Staying in the Dominion meant a lifetime of shame. She would never be accepted, never be respected. At least with the humans, she would be free. "Yes," she said finally. Elias nodded. Then it settled. Vrothak let out a short laugh. "Foolish human, you take my failure as if it is a prize. Very well. But when she disappoints you, do not expect me to take her back." Elias smirked. "I don't think that will be a problem." He turned to Silara and extended a hand. "Come on. Let's get out of here." She hesitated again, then stepped forward, ignoring her father's cold gaze. For the first time in her life, she chose her own path. As the ship carried them away from the Zyrex fleet, Silara looked at Earth, feeling something strange inside her chest. Hope. And she had no idea what awaited her next. Silara sat silently in the corner of the human ship, watching the crew move around her. The humming of the engines, the soft beeping of control panels, the distant chatter of voices, it all felt strange. The air smelled different. The lights were softer, less harsh than the glowing red halls of her father's warship. Everything was unfamiliar. She felt out of place. Captain Elias Carter sat across from her, calmly observing her reaction. He had seen this before: alien defectors, diplomats, and prisoners, all adjusting to human space for the first time. But Silara was different. She wasn't here because she wanted to betray her people. She was here because her own people had thrown her away. After a long silence, he spoke. Hungry. Silara looked up, confused. What? You haven't eaten anything since we left your father's ship, Elias said. Do Zyrexians even eat the same food as humans? Silara hesitated. The Zyrex Dominion valued strength, and warriors never showed weakness, not even hunger. But she was not a warrior, was she? Yes, she finally answered. I can eat human food. Elias smirked. Good. Then let's get something. A new kind of treatment. The mess hall was filled with humans. Silara felt their curious eyes on her as she walked in beside Elias. They didn't look at her with fear or disgust, just interest. A man in a white uniform placed a tray in front of her. Here you go. Try this. She looked down at the plate. Some kind of cooked meat, soft bread, and a strange yellow substance. It smelled good. She picked up a utensil and carefully took a bite. Warm, rich, different. Elias grinned. Not bad, right? Silara swallowed and nodded. It is acceptable. A chuckle came from the soldiers around her. She tensed, expecting mockery. In the Dominion, laughter meant someone was making fun of you, a sign of disrespect. But instead, one of the humans nudged her plate toward her. Try the potatoes. They're the best part. She frowned. Was this kindness? She hesitated, then took another bite. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel judged. Training begins. Elias led Silara to a training hall deep within the ship. It was a large open space with padded floors, lined with equipment and sparring areas. Soldiers trained in hand-to-hand combat, practicing techniques that looked different from Zyrex fighting styles. This is where we train, Elias explained. You want to stay with us, you'll have to learn how humans fight. Silara narrowed her eyes. You think I cannot fight? Elias folded his arms. I think you fight like a Zyrex, but you're not strong by their standards. If you fight like them, you'll lose. Silara's fists clenched. She had spent her whole life being told she was weak. I am not weak, she said firmly. Elias smiled. Then prove it. He gestured to a sparring ring where a human soldier waited. A tall woman with short black hair and a confident smirk. Lieutenant Vega. Elias introduced her. One of our best close combat instructors. Vega rolled her shoulders. Let's see what you've got, alien girl. Silara stepped into the ring. She had trained for years in Zyrexian combat, even though she had never won against her own kind. Against a human, this should be easy. The moment the match started, Silara charged forward, aiming a powerful strike at Vega's chest. But before her fist could land, Vega twisted to the side, grabbed Silara's arm, and flicked her onto the ground. Silara gasped as the air was knocked out of her lungs. She had lost. So easily. Vega extended a hand. You rely too much on brute force. That won't work here. Silara ignored the hand and stood up on her own. Her body ached, but her mind was sharper now. Elias leaned against the railing. You see, humans don't win fights because we're stronger. We win because we fight smart. Silara clenched her fists. Then I will fight smart too. The first step. Over the next few days, Silara trained harder than ever before. Every time she lost, she learned. She was not stronger than the humans. She was not faster. But she had something else. Determination. She studied how humans fought, how they used movement, timing, and strategy instead of brute force. She adapted, copying their techniques, making them her own. And slowly, she improved. One evening, Elias found her practicing alone, sweat dripping down her face. You don't have to push yourself this hard, he said. Silara looked at him, her golden eyes filled with something new. I do, she said, because for the first time, I am not fighting to prove myself to the Zyrex. She tightened her fists. I am fighting for myself. Elias smiled. Maybe Vrothak had made the worst mistake of his life, because Silara was about to become unstoppable. Silara gritted her teeth, sweat dripping down her forehead as she dodged, rolled, and countered. Every muscle in her body burned, but she refused to stop. Across from her, Lieutenant Vega attacked again, moving faster than Silara could react. A sharp kick to the side knocked her down. For the 10th time today, the training hall was silent except for the heavy breathing of the two fighters. Silara lay on the ground, her chest rising and falling, her mind spinning. Vega stepped back, crossing her arms. "You're improving." Silara clenched her fists. "Then why did I lose again?" Elias, watching from the sidelines, smiled. "She's right. You're lasting longer in every fight." Silara pushed herself up, shaking off the pain. Zyrex warriors did not complain about pain. But I am not a Zyrex warrior. Not anymore. She looked at Vega. Again. The lieutenant smirked. That's the spirit. Breaking limits. For weeks, Silara trained harder than anyone else. She woke up before sunrise, pushing her body past its limits. She studied human combat tactics, watching every sparring match, memorizing every move. She learned how to move like a human, not just attack like a Zyrex. Her body adapted, her reflexes sharpening, her speed increasing. And one day, everything changed. The turning point. The training hall was crowded with soldiers, all gathered to watch the next match. Silara stood in the ring, staring at Vega. Vega grinned. "You ready?" Silara nodded. The match began. Vega rushed forward, aiming a powerful punch at Silara's ribs. The same move she always used to start a fight. But this time, Silara was ready. She dodged, twisting her body at the last second. Instead of trying to block Vega's strike with force, she used her opponent's momentum against her. With perfect timing, Silara grabbed Vega's wrist, spun, and flipped her over. The human soldier hit the mat with a thud. For the first time, Silara had won. The room fell silent. Then a cheer erupted. Elias grinned. "Now that's what I'm talking about." Vega sat up, rubbing the back of her head, then laughed. "Finally," she said. "Took you long enough." Silara stepped back, heart pounding. She had done it. She had beaten a human warrior. Not with brute force. Not with strength alone. With skill. Something deep inside her changed that day. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a failure. She felt strong. The real test. Elias watched Silara's progress with growing interest. She was not just improving, she was evolving. But training against humans was one thing. The real test would come in battle. One evening, he called her to the command deck. The room was dimly lit, screens glowing with tactical data. He turned to her. "We have a mission." Silara straightened. "What kind of mission?" Elias folded his arms. "A Zyrex raiding party attacked one of our outposts. We're going to take it back." Silara's heart stopped. A mission against her own people. She took a slow breath. "And you want me to fight them?" Elias met her gaze. "I want to know if you're ready." Silence. Silara's claws curled into fists. The Zyrex had abandoned her. Her father had cast her aside. She had spent her whole life trying to prove herself to them. Not anymore. Now she would prove herself to herself. "I'm ready," she said. Elias nodded. "Then let's show them what a weak Zyrex can do." The ship trembled as it dropped out of hyperspace. Silara stood on the bridge, her golden eyes fixed on the view before her. A distant planet loomed in the darkness, its surface covered in gray rock and metal structures. This was Outpost K-17, a human base now under Zyrex control. Her people were down there, warriors who had trained beside her, Zyrex soldiers who had once mocked her weakness. Now, they were her enemy. Elias stood beside her, arms crossed. "The Zyrex are holding human prisoners. We're going in fast, hitting them hard, and getting our people out." Silara's claws clenched. The Xerx never took prisoners unless they had use for them. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Elias studied her. "You know their tactics better than anyone. You lead the charge." Silara's heart pounded. Leading a human squad. She took a slow breath. "I trained for this. I am ready." She nodded. "I won't fail." Elias smirked. "I know." The drop. The human soldiers suited up in black armor, checking their weapons as they entered the dropship. Silara stood among them, wearing light combat gear designed for speed and agility. The engines roared as the ship broke through the planet's atmosphere. Red warning lights flashed inside the cabin. "Landing zone hot," the pilot called. "Enemy turrets active." A blast rocked the ship. Xerx anti-air defenses were firing. "Brace for impact." The dropship crashed down, metal groaning under the force. The doors blasted open, and Silara leaped out with the humans. The battle had begun. Into the fire. Gunfire lit up the battlefield. Xerx warriors charged forward, their heavy armor glowing under the dim sky. They were bigger, stronger, and heavily armed. The human soldiers took cover behind wreckage, returning fire with precision and teamwork. Silara moved fast, using her speed to avoid enemy shots. A Xerx warrior lunged at her, swinging a plasma blade. She ducked, spun, and slammed her knee into his chest, sending him stumbling. Before he could recover, she grabbed his own blade and struck, knocking him out. A human voice called over the radio. "Squad 2 is pinned down. We need backup." Silara scanned the battlefield. The Xerx had surrounded a small group of human soldiers near the outpost entrance. She didn't hesitate. "Follow me," she ordered, sprinting toward the fight. Proving herself. The trapped soldiers were outnumbered. Xerx warriors closed in, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. Silara moved like a shadow, weaving through the chaos. She wasn't as strong as the Xerx, but she didn't need to be. She dodged a strike, countered with a quick blow to the ribs, then grabbed a fallen weapon, a plasma rifle. Lifting it, she fired with deadly accuracy, hitting a Xerx soldier in the leg. He collapsed with a roar. The human soldiers saw their chance and pushed forward, taking down the remaining enemies. "Nice work, alien girl," one of them shouted. Silara barely had time to breathe before Elias's voice crackled in her earpiece. "We found the prisoners. We need you inside. Now." She turned toward the outpost. It was time to finish this. Confrontation. The human team stormed the outpost, taking down Xerx guards. Inside, Silara moved with deadly precision, clearing the hallways. At last, they'd reached the holding cells. Humans sat in dark cages, their faces filled with exhaustion. "We're getting you out," Elias said, unlocking the cells. Then, a deep voice echoed through the room. "You dare bring this traitor into my sight." Silara froze. She knew that voice. From the shadows, a massive Xerx warrior stepped forward. His black armor bore the insignia of the Dominion. His red eyes burned with fury. It was Commander Rathok, one of her father's most loyal warlords. Rathok's gaze locked onto Silara. "The weakling princess," he sneered, "fighting alongside humans. Have you no shame?" Silara stood tall. "I am not a princess, and I am not weak." Rathok laughed. "Prove it." He charged. Silara barely dodged his massive fist. The ground shook under his strength. He was bigger, stronger, faster. But Silara was smarter. She moved fast, striking at his joints, aiming for weak spots in his armor. But Rathok was a veteran warrior. He adapted, countering her attacks with brutal efficiency. A heavy strike to her stomach sent her crashing into a wall. Pain exploded through her ribs. Rathok loomed over her. "You should have stayed with your father." Silara coughed, struggling to rise. Then she saw it, his arrogance. He thought she was beaten. Good. The moment he moved to grab her, She twisted, using his own momentum to flip him over her shoulder. He crashed to the ground. Before he could recover, she grabbed a fallen shock baton and drove it into his exposed neck. Electricity surged through his body. Rathok convulsed, eyes wide in shock, then collapsed. Scilara stood over him, breathing hard. "You lost," she said simply. Elias grinned. Now that was impressive. With the prisoners freed and the Zyrex defeated, the mission was complete. As the team evacuated, Scilara looked back at Rathok's fallen form. She had faced her past and won. But this was only the beginning. The human dropship soared through the dark sky, leaving the battlefield behind. Scilara sat near the exit ramp, watching the distant outpost grow smaller. The mission had been successful. The prisoners were rescued. The Zyrex forces were defeated. But Scilara couldn't ignore the heavy weight in her chest. Commander Rathok's words still echoed in her mind. "You should have stayed with your father." Would her father hear about this? Would he even care? She clenched her fists. It didn't matter anymore. She had made her choice. Elias dropped into the seat next to her. "You did well today." Scilara looked at him. It didn't feel like a victory. Elias raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because you had to fight your own kind." Scilara hesitated. "I always wanted to prove myself to the Zyrex. But now, they only see me as a traitor." Elias leaned back, crossing his arms. "They were the ones who threw you away first. You don't owe them anything." Scilara stayed silent. Was it really that simple? A hero's welcome. When the team returned to the human fleet, the atmosphere was electric. Soldiers cheered as the rescued prisoners stepped off the dropship. The mission had been a huge success. But as Scilara walked down the ramp, she felt the stares. Not everyone was celebrating. Some human soldiers whispered as she passed, "That's the Zyrex girl. She fought with us, but can we really trust her? What if she turns on us someday?" Scilara kept her head high, ignoring them. Elias, noticing the whispers, clenched his jaw. He stepped closer to Scilara and spoke loudly, making sure everyone heard. "She fought harder than anyone today. If you doubt her, then you doubt me." The whispers faded. Scilara shot him a look. "You didn't have to do that." Elias shrugged. "Yes, I did." For the first time that day, Scilara smiled. An unexpected message. Later that night, Scilara was in her quarters, lost in thought, when her holo-communicator beeped, a private transmission. She hesitated before answering. A holographic figure appeared before her. A Zyrex warrior in dark armor. His reptilian face was partially hidden under a battle helmet. "Scilara," he said, voice low and serious. Her heart stopped. It was General Varkos, one of her father's highest-ranking officers. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. Varkos studied her. "You made quite the name for yourself today. Even your father has heard of your actions." Scilara's breath caught. "And," Varkos sighed, "the High Lord is not pleased. You have dishonored him." Scilara's claws curled into fists. "He dishonored me first." Varkos tilted his head. "Perhaps, but he has sent me with an offer." Scilara narrowed her eyes. "What offer?" "The Zyrex Dominion is preparing for war. This was just the beginning. Your father is willing to forgive your betrayal, if you return now." Scilara's chest tightened. "And if I refuse?" Varkos' expression hardened. "Then the next time we meet, we will not be speaking." The transmission cut off. Scilara stared at the empty space where the hologram had been. She had a choice to make. The path forward. The next morning, Scilara found Elias in the command center. He was studying a map of the Zyrex war movements, his face serious. She stepped forward. "I need to talk to you." Elias turned, reading her expression. "What happened?" Scilara took a deep breath. "My father sent a message." Elias's jaw tightened. "Let me guess. He wants you back." She nodded. Elias exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. And Silara clenched her fists. I won't go back. Elias studied her for a moment, then nodded. Good, because we have bigger problems. He pointed at the map. Red markers glowed across the star charts. The Zyrex are preparing for something big. We intercepted communications about a full-scale invasion. Silara's eyes widened. Where? Elias tapped the largest red marker. Earth. Silence filled the room. Silara's breath caught. They're going after your homeworld. Elias nodded. And we need every soldier we have to stop them. He turned to her. That includes you. Silara met his gaze, her decision already made. The Zyrex had given her an offer. She had made her choice. I'm with you, she said. Until the end. Elias smiled. Then let's get ready. The real fight is just beginning. The war room was silent, except for the low hum of the holographic display. The glowing red symbols over Earth's sector told the whole story. The Zyrex invasion was coming. Elias stood at the center, arms crossed, his expression grim. Silara stood beside him, her golden eyes fixed on the enemy fleet formations. The Zyrex Dominion was bringing everything they had. Hundreds of warships, thousands of troops, and enough firepower to turn Earth into ashes. We don't have enough ships to stop them, said Commander Reynolds, one of the human military leaders. Even with our fleet and orbital defenses, they outnumber us 3-1. A murmur of agreement spread through the room. Defending Earth seemed impossible. Silara studied the display, thinking. The Zyrex are strong, she said finally, but they aren't expecting resistance before they reach Earth. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. What are you suggesting? Silara stepped forward. We don't wait for them to come to us. We strike first. Silence. The idea was risky, too risky. But Elias's eyes lit up with understanding. You mean an ambush? Silara nodded. If we hit their supply convoys before they reach Earth, we can weaken them, cut off their fuel, disrupt their reinforcements. Reynolds frowned. That would still leave a massive invasion force heading toward us. Elias smirked. Maybe. But if we hurt them bad enough, we make them think twice. Silara's claws flexed. We don't need to win the war today. We just need to survive tomorrow. Reynolds sighed, then nodded. It's a gamble. Elias grinned. The best kind. The plan. The next few hours were spent preparing. Human engineers loaded weapons onto ships. Pilots ran last-minute simulations, and soldiers sharpened their resolve. Silara walked through the hangar, feeling the weight of what was coming. This was her war now. A voice pulled her from her thoughts. You ready for this? She turned. Elias stood nearby, dressed in his flight suit, helmet under one arm. Silara exhaled. Ready as I'll ever be. Elias gave her a knowing look. You made your choice, huh? She nodded. There's no turning back. Elias grinned. Good, because you're flying with me. Silara raised an eyebrow. You trust me to cover your back. Elias's expression softened. Always. She felt a warmth in her chest. Trust was rare. She wasn't going to let him down. The ambush begins. Hours later, the strike force hid in the shadow of a dead moon. Engines powered down, waiting. The Zyrex supply fleet moved through the sector, unaware of the trap. Massive fuel carriers and transport ships floated in formation, protected by a handful of warships. Elias's voice crackled in Silara's earpiece. Wait for it. Wait for it. The Zyrex ships drifted closer, almost in range. Then, now, the human ships burst from cover, engines roaring to life. Lasers and missiles streaked across space, slamming into the unsuspecting Zyrex ships. Explosions erupted. The first fuel carrier detonated, sending fire and debris through the enemy fleet. The battle had begun, fighting against her own. Silara's ship dove through the chaos, dodging enemy fire. Her fingers moved with precision over the controls, instincts taking over. Then, a Zyrex fighter squadron locked onto her. Her heart pounded. She recognized their flight patterns. These were Zyrex elites, the best pilots in the Dominion. And they had trained beside her. They didn't hesitate to open fire. Scylla twisted her ship, dodging plasma blasts. "I've got enemy fighters on me." Elias's voice came through. "Hang on. I'm coming." Scylla gritted her teeth. No, she had to handle this herself. She pushed her engines to full throttle, pulling into a sharp climb. The Zyrex fighters followed, just as she expected. She spun, cut her engines for a split second, then let gravity pull her ship into a tight reverse maneuver. The enemy pilots didn't react fast enough. She fired. 2 Zyrex fighters exploded. The last one hesitated. He knew who she was. Scylla's voice was cold. "I won't ask you to surrender." The pilot's response was swift. He fled, disappearing into hyperspace. Scylla exhaled. The battle wasn't over yet. A dangerous victory. The fight raged on, but the ambush had worked. The Zyrex supply fleet was in ruins. The remaining human ships raced away, heading back to safety before the Zyrex reinforcements arrived. In the aftermath, Scylla sat in her cockpit, heart still racing. Elias's voice came through the comms. "Nice flying back there." She smirked. "You too." He hesitated. "Are you okay?" Scylla looked out at the battlefield, the wreckage of her own people's ships floating among the stars. "I don't know," she admitted. Elias didn't press her. Some wounds didn't heal overnight. The calm before the storm. Back on the human command ship, the team reviewed the results. "We did real damage," Elias said, studying the reports. "They'll feel this." Reynolds nodded. "But they're still coming." Scylla exhaled. They had bought time, but not enough. Elias turned to her. "We're going to need you more than ever." Scylla met his gaze. "I'm not going anywhere." She had started this journey as a castaway, a reject. Now, she was a warrior, and she was ready for war. From the command center of the human flagship, Scylla stood beside Elias, staring at the massive holographic display. Earth's orbit was filled with enemy warships, hundreds of them, blocking out the stars. The final battle had begun. Commander Reynolds' voice was steady but tense. "Enemy forces are advancing. Their main fleet will reach Earth's atmosphere in less than an hour." Elias clenched his fists. "Then we meet them head-on." Scylla's heart pounded. The humans were outnumbered, but they had something the Zyrex didn't: determination to protect their home. "We have to take out their command ship," she said. "If we disable their leader, their forces will fall into chaos." Reynolds nodded. "Easier said than done. The High Lord himself is commanding this invasion." Scylla's breath caught. Her father was here. Elias turned to her. "Can you face him?" She met his gaze, her claws curling into fists. "I have to." Elias nodded. "Then let's end this." The battle rages. The human fleet launched into space, moving to intercept the Zyrex warships. The darkness of space lit up with laser fire and missile explosions as the two forces clashed. Scylla and Elias flew side by side, their fighters weaving through enemy fire. Elias's voice crackled in her comms. "We're heading for the command ship. Stay close." Scylla focused. "I'm with you." They dodged incoming fire, speeding toward the Zyrex flagship, a massive fortress-like vessel at the center of the fleet. But before they could reach it, enemy fighters swarmed them. Scylla gritted her teeth. Her own people were trying to kill her. No hesitation. She fired, taking down 2 Zyrex fighters. Elias took out another. But more kept coming. "We can't fight them all," Elias shouted. Scylla's mind raced. There had to be another way in. Then she saw it, a maintenance hatch on the side of the command ship. "I have an idea," she said. "Cover me." Without waiting for a response, she dived toward the hatch, dodging laser fire. Elias followed, blasting enemy ships to keep them off her. She landed her fighter on the hull of the Zyrex command ship and jumped out, magnetized boots locking her to the surface. Elias's voice came through the comms. "You're crazy." She smirked. "And?" He chuckled. "Good luck." Then he flew off to keep the enemy distracted. Scifi pried open the hatch and slipped inside. Confronting the High Lord. Inside the ship, red emergency lights flickered. Alarms blared. Scifi moved fast, taking down Zyrex guards as she made her way to the command bridge. Finally, she reached it. The doors slid open. And there, standing at the center, was High Lord Vecrath, her father. He turned slowly, his golden eyes cold. "So, my disgraceful daughter returns." Scifi clenched her fists. "I didn't come back. I came to stop you." Vecrath studied her. "You have truly chosen the humans. They gave me a home when you cast me aside." Vecrath shook his head. "You are still weak. You always were." Scifi drew her weapon. "Then why are you afraid?" For the first time, her father's eyes flickered with uncertainty. She lunged. Father versus daughter. The fight was fast and brutal. Vecrath was strong, but Scifi was faster. She dodged his strikes, landing sharp blows of her own. "I trained you better than this," he growled, blocking her attack. "You trained me to be obedient." She shot back, slamming him into a control panel. "Not strong." Vecrath roared, shoving her back. But she recovered quickly. She saw an opening and took it. With a final strike, she sent him crashing to the ground. Her father lay there, stunned, defeated. The control room was silent. Scifi breathed heavily. "This war ends now." Vecrath looked up at her, something unreadable in his gaze. Then he laughed, low and bitter. "You have their fire," he admitted. "Perhaps you were never truly one of us." Scifi didn't reply. Instead, she pressed a button on the control panel, sending out a command across the Zyrex fleet. "High Lord Vecrath is down. Retreat immediately." The Zyrex forces hesitated. Then, one by one, their ships began to withdraw. The battle was over. Victory and a new future. Scifi returned to the human flagship, stepping out of her fighter to see cheering soldiers. They had won. Earth was safe. Elias ran up to her, grinning. "You actually did it." She smirked. "You doubted me." He laughed. "Never." Commander Reynolds approached. "We couldn't have done this without you, Scifi." She looked at him, then at all the humans around her. Once she had been unwanted, a castaway. Now she was home. She turned to Elias. "So, what happens now?" He grinned. "Now, we celebrate." Scifi smiled. For the first time in her life, she felt truly free.